there is a challenge that is coming from digital currencies such as blockchain technologies.
So I think it's important to share that anything can be tokenized.
All the money.
I like the idea of a gold standard. I mean, it could be used in a very cryptocurrency way.
Very much sooner than a lot of people understand or think. We will be all at a level playing field.
Hey, welcome to the show. Today I have a very cool special guest, Chris Dominguez from StorageChain. Hey, Chris, how's it going today?
It's great, Molly. So nice to be here with you.
Welcome. So full disclosure before we get into this, I've actually known Chris for a while. He works with one of our Valhalla portfolio companies called Honeycomb Q, and they're in the data storage space, which is what we're going to talk about today. So I just did want to let everybody know that we do have a business relationship, and I'm here to help spread the word on the amazing stuff that StorageChain has been doing. So, all right, before we get into like what's going on now regarding StorageChain and our integration and partnership with Honeycomb, tell me a little bit about your story and how you got to this place where you're kind of leading a distributed data storage business.
Sure. So, I've really spent my whole career being an entrepreneur. They call it a serial entrepreneur, I guess. And I started my career in San Francisco and created some early, SaaS market data companies. One was called StorageChain. One was called Stockpoint, and we wound up selling it to CBS MarketWatch and Dow Jones eventually owned that company. So I was sort of in those days, I was sort of on the forefront of financial data and portfolio management and market data, basically. Okay. And so that was sort of in the early of my career. And then I moved down to LA in the early 2000s and got involved with a company called iFilm, which was an early web video company. And we wound up selling that company to Viacom and MTV Networks. So I wound up working for MTV Networks for a few years. And so, and I have done a couple of other startups with some exits, but basically what I do in my life is try to look for industry groups that are sort of ripe for disrupting industries. And that was very much the case with online finance. It was very much the case with online video. And when we came to, crypto started happening, it was sort of like the next amazing frontier where, there's a lot of fraud and BS, obviously, in the crypto business, and it gets a very bad rap for that. But when you talk to people about blockchain technology and the application of blockchain technology, you don't get that same pushback about crypto. So, and one is DeFi and the other is using blockchain technology to make positive impacts on the world around you, right? So from a super high level, it's exciting because the crypto and blockchain was, emerging technology, which is what I like to participate in personally. And there is this in terms of the data storage and file sharing part of why we started StorageChain. There's this like unbelievable market need for secure data storage. I mean, like every day you turn on the TV or read in the news that some big company has been hacked. And the reason why these big companies are getting hacked, whether it's like Dropbox or Google Drive. I mean, some of the biggest technology companies with the greatest security are being hacked. And it's because the infrastructure for data storage is not that great. And not that great meaning that if you take one file and you upload it to one server, you have to hack one server to be able to get at all this data. And the way that decentralized data storage works is that when we upload data to our network, you would shard the data into 42 separate pieces. You would encrypt each one of those pieces, and then you would place each one of those pieces on 42 separate servers that were in different locations. And we can talk a little bit later about how that part of it works, but the high level of it is that if you are nothing, I'm not going to say anything is unhackable because everything is hackable ultimately. But if you're going to hack data coming off of our network, you're going to have to hack 42 servers, not just one. So the difficulty of hacking is much, much higher. I would say that it's as data initially was being stored inside, in terms of enterprise data, like Charles Schwab would have all their data in their data centers behind their firewalls and controlled by them. And nobody ever thought it was going to be any different. Oh, but guess what? Then it started migrating to the cloud, and they started hosting it in, Amazon and IBM and all these different places, and it's just in a Web 2 cloud. And then we see these Web 2 clouds getting hacked and compromised and all this, and it happens all the time. And so the natural progression of data storage, the data business, is going to be Web3 data storage, which is sort of what I've described as what StorageChain is doing. And there's some other great companies that are working in the space. It's a really cool and interesting space to be a part of. So that's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that makes sense.
So a couple of things you mentioned I'd like to talk about in a little bit more detail. So some people who listen to this podcast are kind of newer to this world of blockchain. So how do you define this concept of Web3? That gets thrown around as like a jargon term. What does that mean to you at StorageChain?
Right. So Web3 basically is business which is conducted with the use of blockchain technology. So when we talk about crypto, usually people are talking about decentralized finance, which is digital assets and Bitcoin and all of the tokens and coins that trade on centralized and decentralized exchanges. So that's the sort of finance component of it. But the blockchain technology itself is what we would call Web3. So you can participate in using blockchain technology without doing any kind of a DeFi. But usually the monetization mechanisms of Web3 have a cryptocurrency component to them, meaning that for us, the way that we can make our network work is that we have individuals that put storage nodes onto our network, which comprises our storage network. And in order to reward folks for putting storage nodes on our network, we pay them in our store coin, which is our native cryptocurrency. So we're basically using blockchain and IPFS and peer-to-peer technology to deliver decentralized data, but the sort of monetization mechanism of it is this cryptocurrency piece, and it trades on exchanges and all that stuff. So it's great technology, but the way you're engaging the communities is through the tokens and the coins. So it's sort of like they sort of work together in that way. But they can be separated, right? I mean, there are some companies that use blockchain technology without integrating a DeFi or cryptocurrency component to it. So Web3 is really business that is enabled by blockchain technology.
And my understanding too is that one of the differentiators for Web3 versus the old way is that sometimes credentials to log into things are stored using like a digital wallet, so that each website that I go visit doesn't have to store my username and password, which in a hacking environment can be risky, right? Like I don't want everybody to know my password. So if I just give it to a wallet, then I can log in with my wallet ID and not have to give other credentials. Is that something that you think fits into this world of data storage?
Yeah, I mean, I think crypto winds up being more secure, I would say. That so like an interaction with a Web 2 company would be that you would have a username and a password, and you may have, third-party authentication or two-factor authentication where, you get sent a text because you logged into your brokerage account or what have you. So that's sort of the standard Web 2 security mechanisms. In terms of the Web 3, there's this one additional layer because Web 3 has both of those features. The one additional layer that usually gets put onto Web 3 would be a passphrase. And the reason why it becomes harder and harder to hack things is because, for example, if you're going to set up a storage bucket on StorageChain, you need a username and a password, and then you need a passphrase for the bucket. And the passphrase, in order to get into your bucket, we do not store anywhere on our servers, which means that you can't, like when we're talking about much, much harder to hack, that data isn't stored anywhere, so a hacker can't steal your passphrase data. I mean, again, they can potentially do it if they can get to your passphrase, but it's much, much, much harder to do because the passphrase data isn't stored anywhere. So you'll notice on crypto wallets like MetaMask, you'll have these like really long passphrases with like 20 words, and that if something happens to your wallet, in order to recover it, you need these big long passphrases that aren't stored anywhere. So I wouldn't say that I would say on Web3 that doesn't make it easier to hack. I think it makes it harder to hack because you need to have these passphrases in order to get to encrypted data. And again, there are all kinds of different examples of how this stuff works, but that's sort of an additional layer of security that a lot of Web3 companies like to put on.
Right. Hackers like efficiency. Like they want to go to one place and get a whole bunch of stuff, where distributed networks means you got to go to a lot of places and get all the things. And if you mess up and you don't get them all, then your file cannot be reconstituted.
Right. So the hacking that takes place in Web3, because I mean, it's cryptographic and it's very hard to hack the actual technology which comes with Web3. So the tact the hacker is going to take is trying to get your credentials from you so that they can unlock it versus hacking it directly because it's that much harder. So the ways that hackers get to you in the Web3 world is a little bit different. And the thing about especially with DeFi and cryptocurrency, where you're trading with wallets and your wallets are just like numbered addresses. It's like sending money from one Swiss bank account to the other. There is no your name isn't involved in it, so it's much more anonymous. And in terms of when you're trading crypto using a wallet, so if somebody hacks you or gets you to send cryptocurrency to another wallet address, is very hard to track it down. And in the US especially, there are all these new rules and regulations in terms of the business is growing up in terms of the digital asset part of crypto, where there have been a bunch of frauds but the core of what DeFi and crypto is all about is really about disintermediating governments and third parties and big data companies into your day-to-day life, right? Like, why do you need Dropbox or Amazon that own and store all your data, right? You should own your own data. You should be able to store your own data, and you shouldn't have to be beholden to some big company that you're paying to own your data, which is why if you put your data on a decentralized network, there is no big company that owns it. And StorageChain is really just the conduit to letting you store your data in a decentralized way. And the same is true with the cryptocurrencies, where the government doesn't like cryptocurrencies. At least historically, they didn't like cryptocurrencies because it disintermediated them, right? And everybody, like all the Gensler and Elizabeth Warren, all these people that are pushing back so hard against crypto, they don't like it when you can disintermediate the government especially with currency. But because I think the stat now is like 52% of Americans own some kind of a digital asset. And when half of Americans own digital assets, the government all of a sudden has to say, okay, we just can't have a anti-crypto stance, because people will vote for somebody that has a pro-crypto stance, because digital assets are the future. And it's one of these things where everybody is starting. It's sort of like a tide that's coming in with this new technology, new class of financial assets. SEC is trying to figure it out. The whole world is really trying to figure out how this works, but we know for sure that it's here for real and it's going to stay. And the further we get into it, the fraudsters and the and the bad actors are getting contained and marginalized as this moves forward. So it's, a lot of people are scared. Oh, crypto, like they're scared of it, but I don't think people should be scared of it. It's like you should embrace the technology and because it really this technology really is the future. So again, that's a long, winding answer to your question, but.
So I've been in the digital asset space for a while, and Brian Brooks made a very clear point on stage years ago that cryptocurrencies aren't here to replace or disrupt currencies or money. They're here to just replace banking, and that the banking establishment is very old school, and they make a bunch of money by not providing a necessary service. And this is why it's not that the governments don't like crypto, it's that the banks want to make sure they don't lose their monopoly. And banks, unfortunately, have a pretty big influence over our governments due to their ability to print money. So now we've kind of this parallel world. So let's say the crypto markets are really here to disrupt banking and remove the need for this third-party intermediary who takes a cut, so we're having to pay them. And two, we need their permission. Like, you get on JP Morgan's bad side, they cut off your bank account and you no longer can run your business. Like, this is a business owner, especially in the United States, you can't not have a bank account and participate in the commerce world. So you need the permission of the banking system to be able to be an entrepreneur and a CEO.
Correct.
So let's hop over to the data side of things, thinking that like the same thing is happening, right? We had this system where central parties like Google and Amazon and Microsoft were really controlling the data storage world. Now companies like StorageChain come along, disrupting that and saying we don't need these middlemen. So do you see a similar path, that there's going to be resistance because the monopolies don't particularly want to give up their free lunch?
Correct. So before I talk about the data side, I want to just hop back and talk about the currency side for just a quick sec, because I think you're exactly right about the banking system, right? The banking system hates crypto because it disintermediates them. And I think you're right about what you said, with the exception of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is actually being used as a currency. Like El Salvador has now adopted Bitcoin as their national currency. And the thing you'll find in some of these countries, even countries like Argentina, and where you have a government that's going to print money and devalue their currency, and it basically winds up wiping out economic value for that entire country. And you cannot do that with Bitcoin. So some of these countries that are adopting Bitcoin as the currency of the country, it winds up being a way for these countries not to be able to have their currencies entirely devalued. The United States does the same thing, right? Like during COVID, we printed all this money and we created all this inflation, and we devalued our own currency, right? And then the Fed pushes up the interest rates. Like, the government is 100% manipulating the currency. And with Bitcoin, they cannot do that. And they don't like that. And that's what scares them. So that's what scares the government. And what scares the banks, obviously, is what you mentioned, which you're 100% right. So now let's move off of currency back over to data ownership, because it's very similar. And I think that the big companies that run the big data centers, like Microsoft Azure and the Google Drives and the Amazon S3s, these are very entrenched, big tech companies that wind up owning all of our. I mean, I remember like waking up one day and I'm like, oh, Google's got my phone number. They've got my email. They've got my documents. They've got like everything you have is like owned by this company, right? It's like insane that, like, why should they have access to every single thing in my life, right? And then, we don't even question it. It's like, okay, Google has Google Drive, Google Voice, Google, right? And Google Email. Like, they really do have access to everything in your life. And eventually that's not acceptable as an operating premise of, like, people should own their own data. Data privacy is a very important thing that, we just all sort of shrug off by putting our data up on these Web 2 clouds, right? That's what they are. And we're a Web 3 decentralized cloud, which is basically doing the same thing that the big data guys are doing, except for you own your own data. And that is, like, I would say, theoretically the greatest sort of selling point. Yeah, it's faster, it's less expensive, it's more secure. Like we have all those three things, but you also own your own data, which I think is a very, very important piece of the puzzle. And it's not that those bigger guys aren't going to be involved in this. As I say, like you watch data transformation go from everything is siloed internally, inside of companies to, okay, now we've got these cloud implementations that companies trust. It's a trusted third-party cloud. That's Web 2, trusted third-party cloud. And now we're going to Web 3, which is not a single or big tech companies are going to be able to own all of your data. So it's a really it's a paradigm shift. The whole blockchain, crypto, Web 3 world is really about disintermediating these big companies that are de facto controlling your life and or your business, right? You should be able to do it outside. Companies should be able to operate outside these regulatory realms. But when you do that, it's sort of rife for fraudsters and people to come in. So as we move forward in this crypto world, it's really about down or containing the bad element, the bad actors, and moving forward there's so much good parts of what we're doing and what we're talking about that the bad stuff needs to be contained. So they either the big data companies are going to adopt Web3 and acquire these kinds of companies and make it part of what they do, right? Or it's going to be Blockbuster and Netflix, right? And they're going to die on the sword of the video return late fees. And because when there's such a market pain and people really hate having to put up with things, that's going to get changed one way or the other. So either the big data guys are going to adapt and embrace Web3 and decentralized data storage, which they may well do, or they're going to fight it, and it's going to be a showdown. So we'll see. That part we're not sure. The business hasn't rolled up at all yet, right? There are a bunch of players in the decentralized data space, right? There's Filecoin, there's Arweave, there's Storage, there's Siacoin. There are a bunch of them that are operating happily and are doing really well, but hasn't been about a lot of M&A activity really yet in the sort of Web3 decentralized storage space. But it's really, we're sort of at the beginning of it. So we'll see what happens.
Now, I'm old enough to remember Napster, which I think was my first exposure to a decentralized or distributed data storage system. And then I'm also quite familiar with BitTorrent and how that works. So when these sort of technologies first came, they were like very fringe and almost frowned upon, and Napster, was shut down. So how has the tide shifted from a world where like that was maligned to now we have all of these very acceptable corporate entities offering this type of service? What changed?
Okay, that's a great question. Okay, so BitTorrent, Napster, all that stuff is peer-to-peer content delivery networks, right? That has nothing to do with blockchain, but it's peer-to-peer content delivery networks, and you are basically using multiple peers on a network to deliver content faster. So it was a decentralized way of delivering content. And I think, where Napster and Pirate Bay and BitTorrent and all these guys got in trouble is they were basically letting you steal copyrighted media content, right? So so the industry was gonna have to change, but the basic tenet of peer-to-peer content delivery is something that we use. So we use peer-to-peer content delivery network using what we call an IPFS network. And I don't want to get too technical, but it's an interplanetary file system. And it was developed by a company called Filecoin, which is really the leader in the market space that we're in. And the technology basically lets you upload data to a cloud and replicate it across multiple servers, so that if one of the servers or nodes on that network goes down, that data still exists as replicated and across the other peers on the network. And the data can also be delivered much, much faster, and in the same way that Napster and BitTorrent and Pirate Bay and all those companies were delivering data by using this peer-to-peer data technology. But when you layer on the blockchain component of that, it also, first of all, we're not stealing data, right? We're enabling users to put their own data on our network, and they're going to pay us in one way or another to be able to have their data on this network. So the blockchain piece of it winds up becoming, the encryption part of it, and also the ability to, have users be able to be compensated for participating in the infrastructure. So I would say that technology, the peer-to-peer technology, is how we're delivering the files at the heart of it, and the blockchain piece is the encryption and the monetization piece of it. So that's how those two things work together. And there's nothing wrong with peer-to-peer content delivery networks. I mean, there are plenty of those that were not doing anything illegal, right? When you start using that stuff for illegal purposes is when, there's gonna be a problem with it. But there's inherently the technology is behind doing that is what we use, and it's solid, and it has been around for a while.
So just to recap, it would be accurate to say that Napster and BitTorrent were kind of like the grandfathers of what we're seeing now in terms of developing the concept technologically?
Correct. So, but again, remember that is not necessarily Web3. The Web3 component of it is, we're using the basic tenets of that technology to deliver files, because you don't want to store data on the blockchain because it's too expensive. So we are actually storing our data on storage nodes that are living in these peer-to-peer content delivery. That we created our own IPFS cluster, which is a peer-to-peer content delivery network. So the data that gets uploaded is not living on the chain. It's living on servers that are part of this IPFS network. And the chain controls that. So it's too expensive and difficult because of the gas fees to actually store data directly on the blockchain. So it's basically those two technologies that work together, which creates the decentralized data storage and file sharing sort of ecosystem.
So you bring up a good point, because I think this is a common misperception, and one that I debate actually regularly with Jimmy about whether or not these blockchain data storage, the files are stored in the blockchain. My stance is that it's inefficient, because I'd have to make copies and copies of my very large video file or whatever. And at some point, that's just not efficient to store the data that way, and it's not necessary. So if that's true, though, and people think that because something's on the blockchain, it's immutable, like the government can't come along and delete my video if I'm talking about something they don't want me to talk about. So how does that fit into blockchain data storage if the files aren't actually on the blockchain? How are they immutable?
Well, it's because of the encryption piece of it, right? Because what we're doing is encrypting each shard individually, and then we're putting each data shard on multiple servers that are outside of the control of any one corporation, right? So think of it as like a collective where, so we're paying users in our cryptocurrency to put their storage nodes onto our network, which is basically a cluster of servers, which we call an IPFS cluster, that lives all over the place. They're basically servers globally. And the blockchain piece is what enables the transactions and the encryption of this. So if you were going to store data on the chain itself, it becomes too expensive, because you have all these gas fees that wind up running those transactions. You don't want gas fees running on your when you're storing and retrieving data, right? Because anything that comes on and off the blockchain winds up having a gas fee as part of it. So in what we're doing, it's like we're using both technologies kind of on top of each other. But you're right that the data itself is not stored on chain. That is not what happens. The data is stored on servers, which are controlled by the chain, and each piece of your file, because, okay, if I'm running a server on the StorageChain network, right? And I've got a bunch of these sharded files that are sitting on my server, and they're all encrypted, so you can't open them or look at them. And each one of them doesn't have any value in and of itself. So even the storage node operator can't like create any, in terms of like the hackability of it. You know, if you have 1,000, shards of different files on your server, all of which need the other 41 pieces from all these other servers, nobody can do anything with it. But the question I always get is like, oh, what happens if you upload your data to a node and that node goes down? You're losing the data, or somebody takes that storage node off your network, you lose the data. Well, that's where the IPFS technology comes involved. And we didn't pioneer IPFS technology, we're just using it. The IPFS technology basically replicates your data storage shards across multiple servers on the network. So if one of them goes down, there's no single point of failure. And that's how high level the technology works. So we're using multiple technologies in here, but the glue is the blockchain.
So just to recap, one of the reasons why in this solution you have developed, a government can't censor content is they'd have to know where all 42 portions of, if they wanted to remove a video, and it's just impractical for them to be able to do that, which is pretty cool.
Right. Which is true, right? And then we do have we have terms of service on our when you sign up, right? So you're not allowed to upload illegal content into our network, and we have the right to take it down if you do. And there's some safeguards like that, but yes, in general, there's no one central place that somebody can go to either steal your data or censor your data or take your data away. So there are multiple reasons why users and companies would want to use decentralized storage and Web3 storage.
All right, I'm going to ask you a question now that's a little bit out there, but I've been wanting to ask this to somebody who's tied to IPFS for a long time. So you just stated IPS, interplanetary file system. Are we sending files to other planets? Like what that name? What's going on there?
I think you get like geeky developers who like Star Trek and like to name their technologies after space age sort of stuff. But the interplanetary file system has nothing to do with any other planets. We're all on planet Earth, and it's funny, when I worked at Viacom and our lawyers, we had this clause. This makes me laugh. We had this clause in our contracts that would talk about, it was the parallel universe clause, which is like, you can't use this in like, we carved out other universes and planets for our entertainment data content, which is, I find hilarious, right? So yeah, we try to keep on planet Earth, but I guess it's crypto kind of has that outer space kind of feel to it. So
yeah, as you know, we're very involved in the XRP world, and that's like the king and the queen of that is Stellar and XLM. Yeah. And Jed McCaleb, one of the founders of Stellar, is now building a planetary station, like a space station called VAST. And he has said in his interviews that people are going to work on VAST as employees, and they're not going to need to get paid, and they're not going to be on our planet. So when I hear about IPFS, I'm like, I wonder if Jed McCaleb is using this for his interplanetary products.
Maybe. I mean, maybe he is, but I think that was more, IPFS is probably more of a nod to the Star Trek, Trekkies than it is to actually putting it into outer space. But yeah, it's cool. I mean, we've got SpaceX, and we can start getting some stuff into outer space. I like it.
Sure. And Elon Musk now has between Twitter X, and we've got these X tokens. So there's a whole lot of theories going on in the XRP world that XRP will be used on X for the Everything app in space. So we'll see. I guess we'll have to wait and see how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool to be, as I said before, just in terms of like what you do with your life. I mean, for me, it's always been interesting to work on innovative, sort of cutting edge technologies, and blockchain and crypto is like absolutely that. And you can feel it maturing a little bit. We were just at the CoinDesk Consensus conference in Austin, and you can feel the business like maturing a little bit. You still get the guys running around in the masks and doing that stuff, but it's really, I mean, it's like one of these, because there was this whole sort of like anonymous thing about crypto, and you were going to be, I mean, that whole anonymous thing is starting to unwind a little bit. It's not like, this business isn't about being in the shadows. It's about, providing real value for real people and real customers. And it's really just the next evolution of it. It's sort of like the Web 1 thing where, there was some like ridiculous bad website for every single thing you didn't even need in the beginning. And there was the Web 1.0 crash where all the nonsense and fraud stuff got washed out. And then, it emerged, the Amazons and the Yahoos and the the companies that were real sort of emerged out of the ashes of that into building a into building a whole sort of economic system. And I think the crypto DeFi blockchain thing is very much the same. It's maybe a little more exaggerated than that, but I feel like it's the same sort of life cycle of business life cycle.
I agree. I've often used the metaphor that there have been three sort of eras of the internet. We had the first one, the internet of information, and then we had the era of community and connection, which is when sort of social media took off,
right,
content. And now we have this era of value where now you can actually send money through the internet for the first time using digital assets.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing, these digital asset exchanges, Uniswap, Coinbase, and it kind of went from 0 to 100 miles an hour very, very quickly. And it's kind of like walking on the moon, I got to say. I mean, it's really cool for an entrepreneur to be able to, not have some of the rules removed, but just to have a landscape that hasn't been, you're part of architecting the business landscape that you're working in, which is very cool and gratifying, as opposed to being put into a structure that you have to deal with. So it's really fun to work in the business space as well. So
awesome. All right, last question before we wrap up. So, as the leader of a company in this distributed data storage space, I imagine you're forward looking to know what to kind of expect for your business and the ecosystem. Tell us where it's going. Like, what do you think this distributed data storage industry will be like in, 1 to 3 years?
I mean, I think it's going to grow exponentially. I mean, it's so funny because what we do is sort of like a spreadsheet, and it's like, it works for everybody. Everybody needs to store data, right? So like one of the first deals we did was with the company called BitMobile, that they were launching a blockchain phone on 4G in, Europe, in Africa, I'm sorry. And basically, what we provided them was what iCloud does for iPhone, right? Where you back up all your data files and you can retrieve your data. So in so much as, you're able to do, mobile data storage outside of the confines of, Google and Apple, it sort of like opens up this whole world, like, oh, why do I have to pay those guys to store my data there, where I can do it, where I can own it myself and pay less money to do it somewhere else. So that's one kind of cool use case of what we're doing. And in the case where we're working with you guys in Honeycomb, right, where we have boxes and boxes and boxes of documents from big companies that are getting scanned in, and it costs a ton of money to store them at Amazon S3 or even the cold storage. And, you can scan the boxes in and put them up on StorageChain, and it will cost, much, much, much less than it would to use the other folks. It's just as accessible. We don't even have cold storage being where you put data, I think Amazon calls it their glacier storage, where you put it and you're not going to touch it. It's there for years and years. And if you want to get to it, they'll charge you some bandwidth ingress and egress. And we don't charge any of that stuff. All of our storage is accessible and hot. And the reason why we can charge so much less is because we use our cryptocurrency to pay our storage node providers. So we don't have the same cost to operate a data center as the bigger guys. So we can come in at a much lower price. But as we talked about before, it's unbelievably secure and it's fast. So like, it's sort of like the trifecta of, value prop is to say, hey, it's faster, it's cheaper, and it's more secure. And you really can do something like that by using blockchain technology where when we talk about the evolution, we've come out of Web 2 and into Web 3, and now we're on a whole different landscape. And it's really, as I say, it's very gratifying and exciting to be working in this space.
You're really introducing a free market to an industry that didn't really have them. We often live under this illusion that we have this free competition, but in a world where government regulations and access to capital is subjective, and if you're in the club, you can often get those doors open, where if you're not, those doors stay closed. This type of an offering is saying that you don't need to be a big central player to participate and to be a node and to make some money off of it. It's kind of like, I don't like to overuse this word, but it's like democratizing participation in this network, because you no longer have to be a very well-funded company to be a data storage provider.
Right, which is amazing, right? I mean, it really opens up, because you're basically using network effect. You're using the other people's ability to want to participate in your project. I mean, it's kind of like Airbnb for data storage, right? Like, everybody's putting their house up there, so you have a network of, we're not building a chain of hotels. We're letting users who have a house and want to rent it out, let them put that up on your network. The analogy isn't exact, but it's pretty close to that. And you can really get to scale pretty quickly if you have a compelling offering. So, and there's so many projects in crypto that were sort of like half-baked, or they were trying to raise the money, sell the coin and then raise the money and build the product later, and the product never got built. I mean, we didn't do that. We built our product, then we listed our coin, and now we're signing up customers, and we're really taking this thing to the next level. So we're building the company in the right way. There's a lot of people try to take shortcuts and things like that, but you can't do that. If you want to be a long-term viable entity, you have to do it right. There are no shortcuts. There are never any shortcuts.
True. There are rules to the game, and you got to follow those rules or they'll take you out.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
All right, Chris, thank you very much. Really appreciate all the insights into this world of StorageChain and distributed data networks. And I'm very happy that Honeycomb has partnered with you guys, and so we can tackle the next set of challenges as this industry grows.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's been great chatting with you. And look forward to doing great things together.